All right, everyone. One of the things that I like to do is to look at the polling and try to see patterns within it. Link in the description, not archived, just an RCP rolling average here, the Trump v. Biden polling. It's like with Biden's approval and disapproval, I noticed a pattern some months ago, whereby his disapproval was rising faster than his approval was dropping. And the way I interpret those numbers, and this is in the aggregate, so you got plenty of polls, it's a scatter shot, it's not just a one-off or something. I interpret that as the flight of independent voters, because it's not affecting the approval nearly as much as the disapproval. So these were people that were on the fence before and said, I don't know, maybe he's doing an okay job. So they're probably not partisan Dems, they're probably not core liberal voters, and they're certainly not super fans of Joe Biden, but they're abandoning him to the disapproval category, and it was like a 2-to-1. With this polling, I think that I'm seeing another pattern here. I think that Biden's ceiling has formed, and his ceiling is in the mid-40s, and that ain't good. It's really bad for him, actually. Trump has managed to rise up several times into the upper 40s within this polling that you see here. Biden has never actually been able to do that. What happened is many, many months ago, Biden was ahead, but he hasn't grown that lead at all. His numbers are almost completely linear. It's wiggle room of only 2 or 3 points for the most part. Whereas Trump has been able to go both lower and higher. And I think that that's the result of Biden's policy making. If people thought that the border wasn't a problem, if they weren't seeing Bidenflation everywhere every time they go to the grocery store, his numbers would be higher. But that is what they're seeing. You've got an out-of-control border crisis, where you've got more than 10,000 people on the average day now crossing the border illegally, with the Biden administration randomly assuming that most of them are asylum seekers and then catching and releasing them, letting them go. They give them a cell phone and say, call us in 30 days. We'll set up your consular appointment. Most of them never come to it. You've got trafficked minors and crime and fentanyl and all these other problems, all these nasty things that are attendant an open border. You do have Bidenflation. People go to the store. They generally buy their own groceries. They tend to pump their own gas, etc., etc. They see their wage statements, and the wages aren't rising as fast as they need to, which is why you've got so much job creation for part-time jobs. It's because people are taking out side hustles to pay groceries, and those are the lucky ones. Oh, thank God I can work 55 hours a week instead of having to take out credit card debt, and I can still eat bananas. I don't have to survive on cup of noodles or anything, and my kids can actually eat. I bought them toys for Christmas and shit because I got this second side job. Other people not so lucky. They can't find a side hustle that works with their schedule for their so-called full-time job, which is averaging 34 hours a week at this point. And so they take out credit card debt. People read the news. They should be getting it from me instead of from MSNBC or Fox or something like that. But no matter where you get it from, you understand there are diplomatic problems in the world. You've got Ukraine, where they're still pumping. They're trying to pump a bunch of money into Ukraine and Israel, by the way, with their so-called border bill, their immigration reform bill, which doesn't reform anything. Taiwan, Guyana, ECOWAS, etc., etc., etc. Problems all over the world that are caused mainly by a weak United States, which lords over the Western Hemisphere, is the linchpin of civilization, arguably. But it's got a vegetable running the show. It's causing problems. I think, therefore, that the combination of these issues has formed a ceiling for Joe Biden. Now, Biden is attempting to counter this in 2 ways. The first is by trying to astroturf issues that are kind of on the back burner. Abortion is the big one. While I am pro-choice, and I've made that clear, and I know there will be people who say I'm a bad person for believing that a woman should be able to choose at the very least in the first 12 to 14 weeks, I don't give a damn. That's my opinion. It's strongly held, and I'm going to keep holding it. It hasn't really metastasized as a major issue on the federal level. Biden keeps trying, but nobody's really taking the bait. Because they're too busy, again, taking out credit card debt to buy groceries or worrying about the fact that they just took over the local homeless shelter to house so-called asylum seekers. Or they're worried about World War III, which is a legitimate concern at this time. We're currently bombing Iranian-backed targets in Syria and Iraq, pissing both nations off in the process. It's not a good thing. It's not a pretty sight. I think that the ceiling, therefore, is formed. And that's counter number 1, astroturfing back burner issues. That appears to be failing. The second is that normally a person who is in office runs on their record. but Biden doesn't have a good record. So he's attempting to shift it to talking about Trump's record, especially J6 and things like that. Well, Donald Trump didn't create as many jobs, Jack. I'm going to make him do push-ups. Donald Trump tried to take over the country as a threat to democracy if it gets back in there and stuff like that. He's trying to make it a referendum on Trump's presidency despite the fact that Trump is not currently in office. It's not working either. Certainly, when Trump's core fan base hears about that, like, oh yeah, I remember the Trump years. Man, that was great. No new wars. Inflation was under control. Things were basically hunky-dory until the whole China virus thing, and then all hell broke loose, and then you had mail-in ballots and shit like that, and the rest was history. I think that Joe Biden is going to be unable to get above 45 in the aggregate polling. And by the way, this matchup is more gentle than the one that involves RFK Jr., Cornel West, and Jill Stein. Caveat. Towards Election Day, the number of people that support those third-party candidates who quite clearly cannot win is going to be shaved off. Much of that will be in Joe Biden's favor. I was correct in my guesstimate that RFK Jr. would not sway the race in one direction or another. In fact, in three-way matchups where you don't count Cornel West or Jill Stein, who are both on the far left, we'll get to that in a moment, it's basically dead even. 50-50 as far as the number of votes lost from Trump and Biden's camps, which I expected, anticipated, predicted, and people told me that I was wrong. I hear that a lot. Cornel West and Jill Stein, though, are dedicated far leftists. They're only taking votes from Joe Biden. They're taking 0 votes from Donald Trump. They're gobbling up left-leaning undecided voters and some fringe Democrats. It'll be a few million people. But it could be in the places that count. If you look at the state polling, Donald Trump's way out ahead in Georgia. That state looks like it's going to be goddamn off the table, even with provisional balloting and shit like that. Michigan, Donald Trump, again, way out in front, probably by an insurmountable margin. That gets you pretty close to 270 right there. You basically only need one more state. But there are 5 other states in play. Again, North Carolina is officially off the table. Trump will win North Carolina, I think, pretty easily. And I don't think that the 11th hour imprisonment of Donald Trump will actually stop him either. We are probably looking at a scenario where the former president of the United States is effectively imprisoned by his political opponent, Joe Biden, for political reasons, which is what it is, on 1 or more felony counts. And he's put in house arrest in the Mar-a-Lago and literally has like an ankle monitor and shit like that, can't leave the property. Not that certainly there are worse places to be in prison. And basically it's going to be like fucking Napoleon in exile. And he's going to come back. I think that if they imprison Trump, or put him under house arrest, or anything like that, I think that it will backfire the same way the indictments did. People will begin to understand this is a political hatchet job, and the people that don't understand that are all going to vote for Biden anyway. When I look at the polls and they're like, well, 55% of Americans say that they would not vote for Trump if he's found guilty of a felony. Well, yeah, okay, well, most of them are already spoken for, so who cares? It doesn't matter. And many of those people won't even turn out, because the alternative is Joe Biden. He's not charismatic, he's boring. He's an old vegetable. He can barely speak straight. He gets a couple of beers in him, he starts listening to a goddamn beer keg telling him what to do. No joke. Look up the goddamn clip. At this point, Donald Trump has a significant advantage going into the 24 election. It's not the same as the polling that I saw in 2016 or 2020. In 2020, he never led. Not in the aggregate, barely in a sprinkling of single one-off polls. He was always behind by a significant margin, sometimes by double digits. And he lost by supposedly a couple 100,000 votes. In 2016, Trump was ahead by like a half a point a couple of times, generally ran well behind Hillary Clinton by 5 or 6 points. On election day, it was 4.5, and he won. If I look at this polling, matchup polling, state-by-state battleground polling, matchup polling where the third-party candidates are involved, if I look at Joe Biden's approval, and Trump's approval, by the way, every metric is at least more positive by a little bit than it was in 2016 when Trump won, and way, way better than in 2020. Catastrophically, astronomically better than in 2020. There's no comparison. In fact, it's basically a 180 of 2020. At this point, I think that Trump could be competitive in Virginia and New Hampshire, possibly winning all the other battlegrounds in the process. By the way, the liberal meltdown, if that happens, or even if Trump wins in a squeaker, it wins by one electoral vote or something like that, will be astronomically funny. That's why we need to vote for him. Right now, you should be knocking on doors and ballot harvesting and shitposting memes online about Big Don versus Little Joe and doing everything you can, because the humor aspect of it is the best part. It would be goddamn hilarious. As of right now, I give about an 80, maybe 85% chance of that being exactly what happens. We may see a magical moment where the American people have gone full goddamn Andrew Jackson. You remember the whole time that he fought the British with a bunch of former slaves and pirates and other riffraff, successfully, by the way. We may witness a magic moment where the newly minted, re-elected President of the United States, non-consecutive, only second time in U.S. history, comes out of the Mar-a-Lago, approaching the presidential limo to take him to the White House. And he stands there and he grins into the camera as somebody bends down on bended knee and snips off his goddamn ankle monitor. It would be the greatest moment in modern American political history by far. It would be more iconic than his goddamn mugshot, which also was a first. There's a reason that he tweeted that out. That's about all. Peace out.